Hi, I'm Bob Ethington.
And I'm Nick Nicholas.
And this is From Akron and Beyond. Our guest today is a fixture in local Akron music. She's been making legend indeed. She's been making great music of all varieties of genres, really. For are we going to talk? We won't say exactly how long, but it's probably been about pushing 40 years, I would guess.
It's over 40 years.
It's over 40 years. I'm talking about Tracey Thomas, and if I sound like I'm being overly familiar with her, it's because I've known her for definitely over 40 years. We go way back, and we're good friends, and it's really a pleasure to have you on today, Tracey.
Thank you.
Now, Tracey is featured in a new book that just came out called Hit Girls, Women of Punk in the USA, 1975 to 1983 by Jen Larson. This book it's very interesting. It deals with women, in punk, obviously, hence the subtitle, but also not the usual names. Like Debbie Harry and Patti Smith, they've been written about plenty. So this is more talking about a lot of the artists who maybe were a little more, not really obscure, but definitely more
under the radar a bit.
Under the radar, perfectly put, Nick. And three different female-oriented artists are in this book, have chapters in this book. The band Chai Pig with Sue Smith and Debbie Smith, The Waitresses featuring the late Patty Donahue, and then the band Unit 5. And that featured Tracey as the lead vocalist. That featured me as the drummer. Hence my going way back with Tracey.
And Nick?
And Nick was
He's the reason.
Nick was very important part of it all because he was the owner of Clone Records, and he really was very supportive of us, and he put out our album, Scared of the Dark, and also the Bowling Balls 2 anthology. We've talked a lot about the history of Unit 5 already, Tracey.
Yeah.
But I'd like to hear your perspective of it. I mean, I've explained kind of how you and I met and how it kind of led to the band, but you talk about how you got into music, your background, even before Unit 5 and then leading to that.
My dad was a musician. And I'm not going to bemoan that subject too long, but it was something I grew up with. He was with Phil Palumbo, who was like a fixture in the Northeast Ohio area.
What instrument did your dad play?
He played everything. With Phil, he played upright bass, but he also was the pianist at the Brecksville Tavern every Thursday for his solo gig for as long as I can remember, even being alive. But so that kind of was the foundation, because my dad was a musician. Mm-hmm. And the stuff we listened to at home, my mom is from, as far back as the eye can see, Appalachia. She was from Richlands, Virginia. Mm-hmm. And so country music, this was so funny, was shunned in my house because she associated it with being, less than great. And they were wanted to be the bougie Appalachian people.
She was like hillbilly music.
Yeah, I was trying to, that's exactly what she said. But then when I turned 16 and I started letting everybody know I wanted to sing, her go-to was, you got to sing country. You got to sing country. It's just your voice. And I didn't do that until I was in my 60s, but I finally did. Mm-hmm. And
I told you that you'd be a great country singer.
You said exactly.
Decades ago.
We are sitting in the yard at Paul Teagle's house at rehearsal for Unit 5. Mm-hmm. And Bob and I are sitting on the grass. Why I remember this, I don't know, with Augie. And you looked over and you said, someday I'm going to be walking by the cutout bins at a record store, and I'm going to see you in there in that white jumpsuit looking like Dolly Parton on your country album. And at the time, I'm like, oh my God, that's the meanest thing you ever did. But now it's like, that would be so cool.
Except for the cutout
I would love to be found in any bin. But yes, you did say that. And then my dad listened to the Frank and the Ella and Billie Holiday, my favorite out of the gate. Mm-hmm. So all those things formed to make me one really weird combination of things.
When I first met you and was knocked out by the Unit 5 and, wanted you on my label. Were you in any other bands before that?
I was in a band called Busted. I was 16. It was a cover band. I sang Van Halen, Led Zeppelin. I actually got them to do some David Bowie. But mostly it was classic rock. And, of course, I had to do the obligatory Pat Benatar. I was 16, and we played bars. I don't know how I made that happen. But, yeah, so Busted, seriously one of the best bands to be forgotten locally. Yeah. I'm kind of sad that we never found our moment doing our Van Halen covers. And Dave Ashley was my drummer, remember?
No,
Dave?
that's...
Yeah. So that was fun.
Who played in...
He was the Bizarros drummer for a while.
Yeah, Dave and I created Busted.
Okay. So that was the band you were in before the Vapors. The Vapors, right, is how we started. And Tracey and I worked at a record store together, a record theater in Fairlawn. And long gone now, of course, but that was a great record store. And so we kind of had met there, and then... and you knew that I was a drummer, and I was looking for a band to play in, and so that brought along Mark Jendersack, who ended up being the bass player in the Vapors in Unit 5, and you knew him, so I'm not sure how that connection happened.
Well, Mark was the bass player for a band called Milestone. They were really popular around here.
Okay,
and their drummer Jim Harris worked at Skyway, where we ate all our meals because my mom couldn't cook. And I was madly in love with Jim Harris. And I was like this little teenage, awkward kind of girl. And he was like a skier and so cool. And so I started going to see the band because he was the drummer. Because I was like, crushing on Jim Harris. And then I met Mark. And... then Mark found out that I wanted to try to sing, so, just through the chain of events, I sang for those guys, and then they asked me to record some backups on their record, and then Mark and I just became forever friends from that.
Right. See, because my memory of this is that you and Mark, who I had never met, maybe you came by the record store, because I was still working there, and we talked, and I remember you guys saying... that you were looking to start a new band, and one of the kind of templates for the music you wanted to do was Devo, and it was Duty Now for the Future. That wasn't my call. Yeah, you're right. Well, I think that was more Mark. Yeah, probably.
I was still into Linda Ronstadt at that point.
But and so I heard that's their second album, and I was listening to some of it, and I thought, that sounds great, and of course, we never sounded even remotely like Devo. I mean, who could? But the whole rhythmic approach and the kind of off-kilter lyrics and stuff, that all appealed to me. And so so I was like, yeah, sure, I'm on board. And so we got together, the three of us, with Mike Johnson, who was sort of there with his guitar, kind of helping out, because just to kind of play some simple chords while we were trying to figure stuff out. As I recall, I mean, Mike was never really going to be in the band. He was kind of there, like he was going to
be the sound guy.
Sound guy,
he was going to do the sound.
Right.
And then after all those auditions we sat through with guitars, we're like, oh.
Yeah, we've talked about Nick and I have talked about that, the difficulty of finding a guitar player. So finally, we were like, Mike, you'll do, and he wrote great songs, and so that was a huge bonus for him. I mean, some of our best songs he wrote.
And the '80s was so keyboard fueled anyway, and Augie had that going on.
Oh, he was great.
I mean, so the guitarist, actually, that genre of music, the guitarist was more like embellishing, I think, and Mike had that going on, but our rhythm section, you and Mark. I mean, honestly, I think that's what made Unit 5 will put us on the map, or even, our little map, but what's the way you guys played was so unusual. You played so much in such a small amount of space.
Did Mike write She's No One's Girl?
Yeah.
Mike
Johnson.
Didn't I write that?
I think you co-wrote the lyrics.
I think Mike and I wrote together. I can't remember. Isn't that awful?
Yeah.
I know. Yeah.
This is my favorite song.
And you know whose favorite song that was? Ted Leo. from Ted Leo in the Pharmacy. He's following me on Instagram now because of the Hit Girls book. He got the book and said, he messaged me, and I'm not, I guess it's okay to say, I wasn't sure who he was. My kids were like, Mom, oh my God, you're not going to believe what just happened. You're not going to believe who just commented, and he knows you. He said No One's Girl was his favorite song, and that was like why he bought the album.
Yeah, I thought you said Kid Leo. So.
Kid Leo.
If only.
Though I'm old enough to remember Kid Leo, but that's a whole different Leo right there. Yeah, so he's a big deal, and that was his favorite song.
That's funny. Well, I mean, I think that Unit 5 musically kind of sounded like, I mean, you certainly did not sound like Hugh Cornwell, but the band kind of was like the Stranglers, because the Stranglers had like this really strong rhythm section and a lot of keyboards and not much going on with the guitar. And
I didn't especially hate women.
Right, yeah.
Bring on the nubiles.
Yeah, right, yeah. Again, I'm not that, but some people would say that when they heard us, they would sometimes compare us. But yeah, I will say, just in the interest of musicianship, that when I look back to the Unit 5 stuff, it was kind of like, maybe I was a little too busy on the drums. Maybe
I don't think so. Honestly, if it was me and I was critiquing myself, that might have crossed my mind. But I think it really worked for us.
Yeah.
It was different.
It was, yeah. I mean, it was
your approach to it, and then
distinctive.
Mark was also very, lots of notes in a small space.
Right.
And I think that's what made us a little different.
Yeah.
I don't think Unit 5 was typical. I am very surprised that people even still know who Unit 5 was, but they do. And it is a conversation that I have in my life.
So this is from Akron and beyond, and our guest here is Tracey Thomas. We've been talking about her early days, in the days of Unit 5, which was the band that I was in with her, and that Nick produced our album, Scared of the Dark. And as mentioned, we've Nick and I, in an earlier broadcast, kind of giving our own bona fides, kind of discussed the history of the Bizarros and the history of Unit 5. So we made our album. We got to play in New York City a few times. We had a lot of fun adventures. It was great. It was a great time. And then it was kind of like one of those things where we were probably, I think you're the one who said maybe we should have just taken a break and then kind of kept going. That. Yeah. But instead, I think, people were getting married and thinking about making a living and stuff. And so we ultimately did end the band, and we've gotten together over the years every now and then for reunion shows and stuff, and those have been a lot of fun. But I'm interested now in talking about all of the wonderful stuff that you've done since Unit 5. Okay, so since we've Unit 5 has been covered. I don't want to.
I'm very shy about talking about myself.
Well, what was the first? I remember that well, first of all, you and I were in another band after Unit 5
that
briefly,
band was good.
and that's the Great Lost Band.
That is.
I don't even know about this.
Yeah. We were called Gone to Egypt.
That was a cool band.
And it was essentially kind of still Unit 5, but with a different guitarist. Dan.
Danny not Opalenik.
No.
Capriola.
Dan Capriola. Yeah, he was a very good guitar player, and still is, I'm sure. And I felt like that band, it was kind of like we'd learned the lessons from Unit 5. Like we had our songs we had a little more varied. Because Unit 5 was very much a dance band, fun band, great to see in a bar band. And Gone to Egypt was that as well, but we kind of had some more varied tempos. We kind of wrote a bunch of new songs that I think were really good.
God, I do too.
Did you
And,
record any of that?
Well, that's a sore subject with me because there is
Yeah.
a few songs on a cassette tape that we just recorded like in the basement, and then there was a live show at
It was right above Ray's, wasn't it? Was it still called Mother's?
Mothers at Mothers.
In Kemp.
Yeah, we played 3 times, and the second time we played, it was great. I mean, we knocked the crowd out. People loved us, and we played. It was just one of those great shows where you're like, when you're done, you're like, man, that was great. And that was recorded, but that tape has disappeared. I don't know where it is. I would love to find that and
I
have
swear
it
it's somewhere
digitalized.
It's somewhere in my possession. I remember having it.
Yeah.
Oh well.
Well, if you ever find it,
was a good
definitely let
band.
me know because I'd like to.
It was like Unit
yeah.
5 tried to be Prague or something. It was a mature Unit 5.
I remember we did a cover of Richard Thompson's "I Want to See the Bright Lights
that was
Tonight."
so fun to sing
but we
that
kind of
song.
we kind of made it a little more up tempo, kind of like a Birds kind of thing, and Anyway, but that came to an abrupt end, as I recall, because someone in the band got pregnant.
Oh. Oops.
Not sure who that was.
I'm not sure. I think it was Mark. That was such a dad joke what I did right there.
I remember, whether it was Time Traveler or some of the record stores in Kent, seeing, a series of Tracey Thomas solo CDs over the years. And there was quite a few.
Yeah, I'm on 11.
11?
Yeah,
I think
that's
so.
great.
I don't even really know for sure, but I think if you include like the live Billie Holiday, which I did, and then the this new one that I have coming out, which is also like jazz standards. I know, me and Rod Stewart, right? I think it's 11.
Yeah, I bet there. That sounds right.
Yeah, God, I'm so old.
But so after this Gone to Egypt thing, which ultimately was a kind of a blip because we didn't last that long. After that, you obviously went on somewhat of a hiatus by your standards with having a child.
5 years.
Yeah.
Oh, man.
Yeah. And then you were in a band with Mark after that. I remember seeing you at Highland Square.
I think that's when I did the solo thing, and Mark played all through my solo career.
Okay.
Bass player. That was. I came back out in '94 with the release of Stand Alone.
So Standalone was
Standing
yeah.
Alone.
Uh-huh.
Great song, too.
Thank you. I still get people asking me for that song.
Mm-hmm. That was a really strong album.
So I came back out with that. Whole different life, whole different direction.
Yeah.
And that was my first I wrote this stuff record.
Right. So I want to go more into that topic, Tracey. So from being in a band where, I'm trying not to be too cliche about this, but it was a bunch of guys and you were the singer and the eye candy and
Was I that? Good Lord.
And it wasn't any of the guys in the band, I'll tell you that much. But it was and so now you're going back to, you're missing music obviously, and you're coming back to it and you're writing these songs for your first album, and then the second album followed relatively quickly after that, as I recall. Just tell me though about your approach, if you can. I mean, I know that's getting introspective, but what was your thinking as you started writing these songs, knowing that these were really going to be your songs?
Well, I'm not crying. I have this wicked case of dry eye disease. So if you see me over here sobbing, it's not that. It's just like, we'll get into my physical ailments later. Honestly,
That'll be part two.
Part two, Tracy's ailments. I always had ideas, and you guys were good about it. I mean, I wasn't necessarily shot down, but I didn't have any way to just bring a song to you and play it unless I sang it a cappella, and that wasn't going to happen. I relied on someone for the music to release all these thoughts in my head. So during my convalescence from having a child, I picked up the guitar just as a means to get the music that was in my head out so that I could spew over it. Like, that was my canvas. And it opened up a whole new world because then I had control. And I'm readily going to admit that I am someone who loves control. There's some people out there listening to this right now going, "Oh God, yeah, Shay loves like Shay so loves the control." But it changed everything. So then I was able to like master my domain, and I love writing. I think if you would ask me today, like how I would remember myself, I would say songwriter first.
Really? Okay.
Yeah, I think so. And then it's weird. It's like I'll go for a year without an idea. And then all of a sudden I will feel it coming in. Like I always say this, it's kind of gross, but you know how when you're nauseous?
Yes.
And you really need to make that happen so you can get over it. It's like I'll be nauseous for a really long time, figuratively speaking, and then it just comes out and I feel better. It's a nagging in there to get this out. And it'll happen in spurts. I'll do like 3 songs at a time. And then sometimes I'll go a year without anything.
Didn't you have a school at one point too? You're teaching songwriting.
I had a business where I worked with kids. I really started wanting to work with kids that were homeless in Akron, and I brought them in, and we did little talent shows, and we helped them. I had a little staff, and we helped them get their creative side going, and I loved it so much, but it just ended up being overwhelming for me because I'm not a business person. The ideas was there and the creative side was there, but oh my Lord, I'm a horrible business person. So it kind of fell apart, but I did work with some local theater groups, and it was very fun. I was just kind of bad at it.
Yeah. Well, the intentions were good.
Intentions are always good.
And I know that people valued it, at the time. But yeah,
my follow through is weak.
Another aspect of your music, well, first of all, we were talking about the album Stand Alone. I mentioned, like a Richard Thompson song that's little blip on the radar, Gone to Egypt covered, but the song Stand Alone is still probably one of your most popular songs.
It's a really good song.
It probably is the most popular song. It had staying power. I think, and I don't want to wane philosophical here, but I think when the writer really has something important to say and that comes across, regardless, it gives it an eternity feeling. Instead of just sitting down and writing, it's okay, I'm going to write this today because I need to create something, verse, chorus, here's my song, it's really great. It might hit for a minute and it leaves, but when something comes from this secret place, it stays. And, Standing Alone was written about Tony, my first husband, who killed himself.
Yeah.
And so it was a whole chapter. It was a big deal emotionally. And I think because that came across, it stuck. I know for me, the music that's timeless is the emotional stuff. I've actually had people come up to me at shows. I'm going to quote here, and you know who you are. I did a singer-songwriter circle once with, it was so great. It was me, Angie Hayes, Rachel Roberts, and it was a singer-songwriter circle, okay? It wasn't a Led Zeppelin cover evening. So we take our break, come down off the stage, and this woman says, can you please do something that doesn't make me want to punch my eyes out? And
what do you say to that?
Well, I'd had too much wine.
He punched her.
Every musician I've ever worked with is out there going, oh, yeah, she had too much wine. George Cabanis used to call me Akron's Amy Winehouse, but that's a whole other thing. But I went up and I told those girls, I'm like, this woman, oh, my God. And so I sang a little bit of Walking on Sunshine for her. And she left. But I've had musicians say to me, this happened recently, can we put some more up-tempo stuff in the set? Like it's really dragging. It's really, I flat out said, that's me being me. I'm not going to, and I always use this as my example, I'm not going to play Walking on Sunshine. It's not me, and the people who like my stuff will get it. And sometimes I don't get big crowds. Not everybody wants to come and cry in their beer, but I just can't do it any other way. The up-tempo stuff, just like I'll be up there doing it and feeling like, God, you're such a tool.
I wonder if anybody's had that same conversation with Leonard Cohen.
Oh, I like that comparison, right? Yeah. Yes, would you tell Leonard Cohen you wanted to punch your eyes out? No, it's all about the emotion for me. Yeah. And I know it can be a drag, but...
what was really cool when you first came in there today, we discussed that U2 song you heard and what it did to you.
You're killing me.
No, but that's important, because... emotion, and there's just some...
It's everything.
I mean, like I was crying listening to the Pogues, this last St. Patrick's Day.
Yeah. Of course, Nick probably would have been crying anyway because he was half in the bag.
Yeah. Just crying in my corned beef.
The potato made you weep. But what was the U2 song?
Well, it's my favorite song.
Okay.
It's called Every Breaking Wave, and you don't often hear it, Mm-hmm. It's not one of the bad radio-friendly U2 songs. They have plenty of those, and I admit it. Mm-hmm. But that's my band.
Yeah.
And it's the sad stuff that I love. But that came on the radio, and I was on my way here, and I was like, oh my God. And then I'm crying, and my thought is, oh my God, you just did your makeup. Okay, stop. And, so I get here in the parking lot, I have to redo my makeup. That song slays me emotionally. And that's kind of what I want to create. I want people to be driving in their cars and have that moment. I don't know why. It's just... Be moved
by the music. Yeah.
When people come up to me and say, you made me cry, I'm like, yes.
Well, luckily for you, Tracey, this is the medium of radio and podcasts, so your makeup won't make any difference.
No, but it does look good, right?
Looks fine. Yes.
I don't do that for just anybody.
This is From Akron and Beyond. I'm Bob Ethington with my co-host Nick Nicholas, and our guest this episode is Tracey Thomas. Akron music legend, as he has been proclaimed.
Legend thing, right?
By me and everybody.
Isn't that just an age thing? Is it an accomplishment thing, or is it an age thing?
I think there's someone. I think it was there was someone. It might have been Alfred Hitchcock. There was some director who said once they start calling you a legend,
Yep.
But okay, so we've talked about your solo stuff, but I think your solo stuff. I know that I know the kind of stuff you write tends to have that kind of everything you've just described. It can be not necessarily up tempo. It can be kind of melodic and moving, poignant. But you do that takes other forms because there's the solo writing that you're doing yourself, but then there's also like the country songs that you do and almost kind of Americana stuff. You've kind of have
more Americana than country.
Yeah,
right? I don't know if I would call myself country.
No.
Yeah,
because it creates this vision of homogenized singer-songwriter machine.
Right.
And I don't want to even, like, for example, and this is terrible, like a Tim McGraw.
Yeah.
Kind of, and that's fine. There's a big market for that.
Yeah.
But country isn't to me what it once was.
Right.
I love Patsy Cline, Loretta Lynn. That's the stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And
sure.
I don't know. I guess country kind of lost its way, in my opinion. But Americana, I feel that's probably just that one album.
Right.
Last album.
Yeah.
Which is really important to me, that one.
And you've also, if I'm not mistaken, you've also kind of done some music sometimes with other people that's kind of bluegrassy in a way, kind of Appalachian.
Oh, I'd love to think that. Yeah. I would like to think that people pick up on those.
Mm-hmm. Not that it's overtly that way, but it's an influence, right?
Oh, yeah. Absolutely.
And then, of course, there's your love of jazz that goes back maybe to your dad, but is key to a lot of the work that you've been doing. I've played drums with you several times at shows, playing usually jazz stuff with Tim Longfellow. You're
20 years, I think, Tim and I.
playing piano, yeah. And a variety of other guest artists have come in and played, and I always enjoy doing that. Now, your latest album, well, not your next album, is another album of jazz standards that you recorded recently live.
Yeah,
right.
We did it live. It was kind of a blast, I have to say. I was very nervous, and I wasn't exactly sure how it would go, and I feel like I was more tense than usual, but I think we got some good stuff out of that. We'll see. The only other time I've recorded that music was when we did the Billie Holiday. Well, it was not really a tribute. Like I didn't come out with gardenias in my hair or anything. I just presented the music.
Yeah.
But that sold out and has long since been gone. We sold that out in like a month.
Yeah.
And this will really be the first time we record something and put it out that isn't so limited. But it's the stuff that was most requested. And a lot of it, because my little demographic is smart, is the slow, sad stuff, like Funny Valentine. Oh, God, I love that song. But yeah, so we're going to do that. I'm not sure if we're going to print it. I think it might just go right on electronically, too.
Like a streaming thing?
I think so.
Yeah. That was recorded at Jilly's Music Room?
Recorded at Jilly's. We had Brad Bolton on guitar. I mean, talk about legend. He's so great. He's been around the area for a long time. And then Terry Hind did the sax for us. And that's always a pleasure because Terry's approach to stuff is like the masters. He's very, very talented.
Terry Hind from the Numbers Band, amongst other things. Yeah. So, well, that's exciting. What's your favorite Billie Holiday song?
Well,
I mean, it's probably hard to narrow it down, but
it's hard because everybody did the same songs. But Gloomy Sunday, probably that kills me. Good Morning Heartache, the stuff where she bore her soul, as I have, I might reiterate, I'm very fond of. The moody, sad, like, oh my God, I'm going through a thing in my life stuff. Billie hit that emotional note probably better than anybody, I think.
Sunday is gloomy, my hours are slumberless. Gloomy Sunday.
A funny thing about this is just an aside, but a funny thing, I was reading a book about jazz recently, and Billie Holiday in an interview once said that her favorite singer was Louis Armstrong.
Yeah.
And it basically, if you listen to her and you think of him singing, she sings a lot like Louis Armstrong. I mean, you would never think of it in terms of how different their voices are, in terms of timbre and everything else. But the phrasing is similar. She definitely was influenced. But as Miles Davis once said, everything in jazz came from Louis Armstrong. So
did he say that?
Yes. So there you go. Don't argue with Miles, whatever you do.
Love Miles Davis.
He'll find you and punch you.
He will find you and punch you and turn his back on you.
I also wanted to ask you about just getting off of music, a couple of the other interests that you have. I know that you, I don't think this is any big secret.
You're going to embarrass me now, are you?
No, I'm not trying to embarrass you. Well, maybe I am. No. No, you have an interest in the paranormal, and you have an interest in, you describe it because I don't want to say the wrong things, but I know you do readings and stuff.
And only
talk about that as much as you want.
I've been in the closet for a long time with all of this.
Yeah.
But I do come from a line of really weird women who have this. That's why I want to do a podcast, because I have to explain myself here. I am so petrified of being locked into the word psychic and conjuring up Long Island Medium and Sylvia Brown and those women who I don't know. I don't know. I just know when someone tells me something that's fact. I do this. This is why. God is this. No. Because we don't know. None of us know. And I don't want to be associated with anybody who makes a mass amount of money conning people.
Right.
So I just didn't go there in my life. But I was born with a call, which is a thing. Like it's basically, scientifically, it's just a membrane. But the doctor told my mom before he even said if I was a boy or a girl, oh, you have a little psychic. And then told her the legend of how Native American tribes would take these kids, put them aside. They were raised as shaman,
Yeah.
And I have been able to know things my entire life that I shouldn't have known.
Yeah.
And I say there's a door there that didn't close. So sometimes it's great, sometimes it's horrible. But I have been poked and prodded, and I have this thing that I can do. And I like to use it for the greater good. And being a believer in karma, I would never cheat or lie about it. But I just have this thing I can do. And it's weird, and I will tell anybody I read for, I don't get it. I'm not going to pretend I know. We'll see what happens. And usually something odd occurs. But I don't know. I've been kind of into it my whole entire life.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think that's, I again, the last thing I was trying to do is embarrass you. I think it's a fascinating aspect of your life and your personality. I tend to be something of a skeptic on this, but I will say, without going into any details, that Tracey did once communicate to me something very personal that was very meaningful to me. And
I didn't want to tell you. That was so hard for me. I went to my husband. I'm like, I can't do this.
Yeah.
I can't bear this message.
Yeah.
And it's not
I'm
always
glad you
a
did, though.
gift.
I'm glad
it's
you
not
did.
always something I want to do.
Yeah.
But I know when it comes in, I have to. It's that whole gotta purge it thing.
Right. Yeah.
I went up to this guy in the street once, and I'm like, I'm so sorry I'm approaching you, but I have a message, and I'm like, oh my God, I'm insane. And he cried on the street. I'm like, I'm so sorry, but I think you needed that. And
That
he
was
was
Nick. That was
so
Nick,
grateful
wasn't
to me. Nick is there's a wall up with Nick. I've never gotten anything on Nick.
She confided in me that I was going to get a traffic ticket the next day.
I think anybody who's driven with you knows that could happen. It does not take a second.
my wife will. She'll love that.
But anyway, that's my weird whack. Yes, and I have a business called Queen of Cups Tarot. I'm kind of a tarot master because that's my thing. I love it. It's fascinating. It is not devil stuff. I've had cousins that won't talk to me because, we're Southern Baptists from Appalachia. My family came on the Mayflower and has been in Virginia in the hills since the 1600s. I and my sister are the first generation out. These cousins, I remember once one wrote me on Facebook, one of my mom's cousins, I'm glad your mama ain't allowed to know and see what you're doing right now. You're doing the devil's work. I'm like, don't put it on my Facebook page. So we'll just keep that bit about me on the down low, even though now we just did a podcast about it, Bob, so thank you so much.
Available streaming everywhere.
Available.
And I think it would be remiss not to mention that, Tracey, you have a very talented family. Your son and your
family.
2 daughters, all very musical.
They all three. All three. Just, it's crazy. It's so fascinating to watch these people that you make and bring into the world become what they're going to become. And it's really, you can do the basics. You can lay the groundwork, but then it's just on them. I did have somebody once say, and it really kind of broke my heart, that I had forced my kids into music. And I didn't force my kids to even go to bed at night. I didn't. I wasn't that person. My kids will come to me now as grown adults. 2 of them are grateful for me. One of them is like, I could have used more structure. It's like, no, I'm sorry. I loved you. I fed you. I'm not a structure person. I don't live like that. But I think I did a great job, and they found their way. They all found their way to music. And did I influence it? Yes. Did I push it? Never. But my husband owns a freaking record store.
Yeah. Right.
They grew up with their little wheelie things that you put them in when they're little, and they go with their feet, those zooming around the Cuyahoga Falls store.
Yeah.
So maybe we both pushed them. I don't know. I think guided might be a gentler word, but they all found their way, and they're all very talented.
They were surrounded by all this really great stuff.
And they got great taste in music.
Yeah, between you're being a creative musician and your husband Scott Shepard owning Time Traveler and them being surrounded by all kinds of music.
Yeah.
Obviously, they're going to pick up on that, or they're going to totally reject it. It could go one way or the other. I know that. Now we'll turn from Akron and beyond into a parenting seminar here. But I've always thought my wife and I have had 4 children, and particularly when you're a young parent, you're reading all these books and you're getting all of this advice, and people are telling you how to raise your kids and stuff. And I found, and I tried all that stuff. I found none of it had any effect at all. In fact, I always thought that my kids their siblings had more effect on them in a weird way. It was more the relationships between.
It's always like that.
Yeah, which would be fascinating. But
and they're never, it's like a diet. One way of being and eating and living is not conducive to everybody. It just isn't. It's not. It's like your religion. You got to find your own way of being, and all 3 of my kids are so different. I can't even believe how different they are, and so they each it was like mealtime at my house because I'm a mad cook. That is my other huge passion. I had to make different food. It was like a restaurant. One was vegan, one was vegetarian, one loved his meat. I was like, I did that for them. And I catered to their differences and encouraged them. And I never really just had one way of being. And if I had to pass on a message to parents who have expectations from books, which I did, read them, great. But, it's going to change on you so fast. It's not that you have one way from a book.
No, you don't. I guess ultimately what I'm getting at is parents don't have the control that they'd like to think they do.
No way.
Or the effect.
No.
This is From Akron and Beyond, and we are back from the beyond. I'm here with my co-host, Nick Nicholas. This is Bob Ethington with our guest, Tracey Thomas. And we begin this episode speaking about how there's a chapter on Tracey and her band Unit 5 in the new book, Hit Girls, Women of Punk in the USA. That's by Jen Larson, available at bookstores and, actually Time Traveler CDs in Akron.
Got 'em in.
But when mentioning this book, it came up, this is news to me, that you've written a book.
I have.
And so would you care to speak about that at all?
I have been trying to do this for years. And then I always shelf it because I have this weird inner dialogue that only my best friends know how insecure I really am about why would you write a book? Who cares? I don't know why I even did it. It's a memoir, which is really, really pretentious, right? But I guess the impetus for it was I'm so into genealogy, I'm obsessed. And I keep thinking, if one of my ancestors had put all this down, I would have loved it. So somewhere down the line, I'm hoping, someone gets something out of it that they can relate back to themselves. Like, why am I this? Why am I that? And my life has been exceedingly hard and a series of overcoming huge obstacles, and I've done it. And so to me, it's a little interesting to put that down, but I keep shelving it because I think it makes me just like a big, egotistical doofus. But I'm going to do it.
Great line.
We're working on it. My best friend from high school, do you remember Andrea Beckett?
Yes.
No, we were inseparable. So we've reconnected after all these years, and now we're besties again. So she's helping me edit it, and I really don't know what I'm going to do with it, but I am going to put it out probably in the fall.
Okay, well, that's exciting.
It's embarrassing. There's a lot of stuff in there I don't know if I even want to tell people, but
Is there anything about me in it?
Yeah, the
Of
truth comes
course.
out finally, Bob.
How can I do a book and not mention you two guys?
Nick, we need to consult our attorneys.
Well, you may want to. Nick's good.
I'm okay.
Well, I think ultimately, anyone who has the impulse to write, be it a song or a poem or a book, you do it for yourself. And then hopefully it can reach other people.
No, that's exactly it.
Yeah. And, but I think it's worth doing just because you had impetus. Again, in your case, it's probably like the nausea.
Everything is. I compare everything to nausea. What is that about? I need to ask my therapist. Why do I do this nausea thing?
It means something. I'm not sure quite what,
Right.
but yeah.
Just purge that. And then my friend Mark Lee Shannon just did his book, but it's brilliant and it's purposeful. It's meaningful. He's helping people with it because he has this great cause.
Right.
And then I'm like, I'm just doing it because it's like the book is called Look at Me, so it's very apropos, right?
That's great.
It's a perfect title.
It so is, if you know me. But it's all about why do I crave that attention and at the same time hate it from the depth of my being. It's such a contradiction. And there's just a lot in there I think can help people.
I think that's a more common.
But not like
Great.
Mark Lee. He's like really helping the people. I'm like, well, I this and I did this and I did this. And Ted Leo follows me on Instagram. All my kids are musicians and I'm the coolest thing. I don't want it to come across like that. And I talk a lot about the metaphysical stuff, which is really embarrassing, but why not?
I think it's
I'm
great.
63 now. I have nothing left to care about. I just put it all out there.
It's a spring chicken, just a kid.
Oh, yeah.
There is a certain liberty with getting a little older, though. You don't care sometimes
And
about...
like wearing these pants. I wish they could see them on the podcast, right? I take liberties with some of my fashion choices now.
Well, this has been From Akron and Beyond. Our guest has been Tracey Thomas. It's been terrific having you as our guest, Tracey,
you.
and I hope you
honored.
enjoyed it. We enjoyed it very much.
Enjoyed it very much.
And so on the behalf of Nick Nicholas and myself, Bob Ethington, thanks, and we will see you next time.